Hey guys, just remove the SD card and put it into the computer. Let me go ahead and show you the process. So hit Lightroom Classic. It's going to load up for a second here. And the first thing that we need to do is import all of the photos that we took. Go to Library. In the bottom left, there will be an import. Perfect. Looks like we already have a folder for Mr. X2 over on the right here. I'm going to put it into the main folder. Quite a few photos. I think I already know that they're all good to go, so I'm just going to click import. And then what Lightroom does is it puts it all into a current import folder. And this will take a minute, so I'm going to pause it real quick. Just wanted to show you the progress real quick. So it imports all these photos, and it also has fetching initial previews, just so whenever you click on it, you can kind of see what it tentatively looks like. And you can see, especially on this larger screen, that there is a pretty shallow depth of field. All right, I'm gonna bring you back in when we're all finished up. Okay, so it just completed. We have 1,401 photos, so that's quite a few. Gonna go ahead and pause it again. Okay, so the next thing that I did was I decided to convert all of these photos into lossy DNG instead of the .arw file type. If you go up into library, you can hit convert photos into DNG, only convert RAWs, delete originals after successful conversion, JPEG preview, use lossy compression. If you embed the original RAW file, it'll just be the lossy, which is the smaller file size, in addition to the RAW file size, so you'd actually increase the amount of file size that you're dealing with. I go ahead and use lossy compression, otherwise it's pretty much the same file size. You can actually just convert into DNG when you first import. I forgot to do that. I don't know if you can change the lossy compression or not, so I go through this step. It changes a 24 megabyte file into a 2.4 megabyte file, and I feel like when you're transferring between Photoshop and Lightroom and having all the extra data, there's just so many files. If you're doing a stack of 100, I feel like it just allows your computer to move a little bit quicker, almost like if it were a high quality JPEG with additional data in the color spectrum, so that you can make changes and pull up and adjust any colors that you need, any highlights. You still have the raw capabilities. I would say if you underexpose things really bad and you need to bring things up, that's like probably one of the only times where you don't really want lossy compression, because lossy compression, if anything, is worse in really dark areas. I think you'll introduce more noise, and the color data isn't retained quite as well. but honestly, it's still going to be much better than a JPEG. I have, I think, 64 gigabytes of RAM, and typically I use all 64 when processing photos. I don't know if that's just a PC thing, if it would be better on a Mac, but it can be pretty intensive. So just in general, keeping the file sizes smaller is just a step I do. I'm going to watch a lecture while all of this is getting dealt with so that I can use my time effectively. Okay, so that took at least an hour or two. Quite a long process. The next thing I do is I go to the loop view. This just kind of brings a larger image onto the screen. And then I go through and hit 1. That sets the rating to 1. That way I can filter it later. And then I press X for photos that are kind of just garbage and I don't want to have to see again. Okay. And then I just kind of cycle through all of these. I'm hitting the right arrow key on my keyboard, and I'll just go through a stack until it kind of reaches the bottom of the stack. Or it'll run out of images. Okay, so I think all those look good. I'm going to go back into the grid view and select the first non-blurred out one and then hit Control G. That'll put it into a group. Got 95 images for that stack. And then the other stereoscopic portion, this all looks great. So I'm just going to keep cycling through it, kind of figure out where it ends. Sometimes if you hit forward a lot, the computer can't process it, can't keep up with it. So once it loads, it'll jump to it. I'm way further down the stack. I'm pretty happy with all those images, so I'm going to go back into the grid view. Select all those. You can see right there, I was on this image was selected. If I were to hit Control G, that would be the top of the stack. I want the first image to be the top of the stack, so I'll select that and then hit Control G. Not happy with this. X. Move on. And then I adjusted it from the top to the bottom. I like to give myself a buffer room just in case I visually don't see on the small little LCD screen of the camera where the beginning of the tooth structure start. So I end up getting more than I need. I see it starting to come into focus there. Really more like there. So I'm going to cycle through here. I may just scroll through towards the end of the stack. And I'm happy with all those for a final image. Do the same thing over again. All right, I'm going to scroll through towards the end. I could see that moved, so I'm going to delete that. I think that one was almost on its way to falling. Gonna Scroll through towards the bottom. And I'm happy with all of those. Gonna group those together. Okay, next one. Immediately we're pretty spot on. I almost should have given myself a little bit more leeway on that one, just so I didn't clip out anything that would have been vital. Okay, I think the last two images are superfluous. Gonna deselect those. I guess you can just highlight it down here. That's a little bit easier than going back into grid view. Okay, this is where I adjusted the lighting. And then immediately at the bottom of the image, you can see it's really nice and focused. I'm gonna scroll over towards the end. And yeah, I'm happy with all that, so I'm gonna include that. I'm gonna go to where? To here. Next one. Adjusted the lighting on this one as well. Sometimes you'll have a bunch of sample images. One of the best ways to tell whether it's a sample image or not is to go until the lighting looks consistent and the placement looks consistent, and the only thing that's changing is the focal plane. Okay. Got all the blurry ones gone. Looking at this area of the image to see if it's sharp and where that sharpness begins or ends. Kind of hard for me to tell. I don't think I'm getting any good information after that, so just going to select all these, group them. This is where we did the scale photos. Just going to hit a 1 star, that way we can have those later. Honestly, I think I may have erroneously flagged those as not good. Let me figure out how to undo that. Okay, there we go. Unflagged. So that's the set flag. I'm going to unreject those. I'm going to go to the bottom of this stack. Group those together. Don't need this. Set the scale rating to 1. Nothing's in focus here. Gonna cycle through until I see something in focus. Maybe like after that. Okay. And then working backwards. I don't really see anything until into focus until here. So everything after that, I'm just going to reject. And you can kind of tell here that right around here on that last tooth, you can see where it becomes blurry, where there's a little bit of a red border. I want that to become as minimal as possible. I kind of recognize that as the bottom of the stack. And then everything after that, I can just kind of go through and X out. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pause here unless I find another detail, and then I'll get you on to the next step. Okay, so for this image, since I rotated the camera at the time vertically, and the light is coming from over here, I do want to actually physically, well, not physically, but representationally, for all the photos that are oriented that way, select all of them, and then hit Control, and then the end bracket, and that will rotate all of the images. I'm going to hit Control D to deselect because I want to just double check that the end of this stack is also coming from the upper left. So we rotated all of these correctly. That's just something that you may want to do if the camera was rotated. Okay, so I just went through and finished up the rest of the stacks. I'm gonna Control back scroll just so I can see a little bit more at the same time. I did end up going through this extra large stack. I think I was having some issues with it doing multiple flashes per image. So it ended up being 141 images. I might go ahead and just remove these from the stack. Bear with me for just a second. You can always see at the bottom left of this view how many images you have selected. That's 48 images. I'm just going to go ahead and go to stacking and remove from stack. Perfect. So that brings it back to 93, which is a lot more reasonable for Photoshop. Okay, so I had a lot of extra images, which I'm completely fine with. Storage is very cheap. I think with my 8 terabyte internal hard drives, it turns out to where a gigabyte is 2 cents. If these images are 4 megabytes, 2 megabytes, fractions of a penny. Okay, so I'm going to go down here to the filter, and I want to do no rejects that were flagged. And I created a preset for myself to where on the bottom right, I have that. You can say save current setting as a new preset. So that filter where I have no rejects is just no rejects. That can be really helpful. I like kind of going through. I also have a lot of the old photos opened, so I'll go into stacking and collapse all stacks. That visually cleans up everything. This was from a different thing, just a photo for some friends. I'm going to delete those because they're actually in my typical photo album. I have this entire catalog just for research, and then I have a personal catalog for anything after I started photography in 2020. And I also have archival photo catalog for anything before 2020 back to 1935, just family photos and slides that I've scanned in. Keeps everything separate, that way it I can use it for each special occasion. Typically I'm living in my 2020 plus. Okay, so I'm going to go to a smaller stack just to demonstrate kind of the process. Let's go to this one. I'm going to hover over it and then click it. If you just click it sometimes without hovering over it for half a second, it won't actually open. I'm going to select all the photos. I'm going to go to Developed tab. I'm pretty happy with this. Let me kind of update the neutral target. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. And I want to copy just the white balance. So I went from copy, white balance, copy. And then I'm going to stacking, expand all stacks. And then I'm going to select all the images and develop settings, paste settings. So what this is going to do is it's going to go through all of the images that we captured and set it to my initial gray card white balance exposure that we captured first thing when we were taking all of these images. That's just going to give it a really nice consistent color. And then I'm going to go back to collapse stacks. Visually you can see what's going on a whole lot better. So I think I was going to go with this one. Okay. I'm going to select all of them, go back into develop, and you can see over on the right, upper right hand side, all the temperatures are updated. I'm going to just select one image to start with, because if you apply settings to everything, it can take a second. I hit auto settings. I'm pretty happy with that. Nothing crazy is going on. Just kind of reduces any overexposed highlights. My blacks are fine where they're at. I'm happy with that. Yeah, I think this is a good place to be at. So I'm gonna copy all the basic adjustments which were changed over here. Press copy. And then select all of the images. And then hit paste. and you can see the same change for all the images have been made. If you select all of them and just hit auto for all of them, it could have many different little changes and they won't be consistent. So it's better to physically go through and make manual adjustments and then copy it to all the images after one image. If you do make one little adjustment here, I'll show you. When you have all of them selected, you have to synchronize the settings. You can press Ctrl Z to undo that, but it can take a while. Okay, so now that the exposures are kind of where I want them, I'm going to go back to library. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to say edit in Adobe Photoshop. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Cancel. Edit in open as layers in Photoshop. So if I were to open in Photoshop, that would create 42 separate pages in Photoshop. With this, it's going to open 42 image layers into one canvas within Photoshop. And this can take a second. A lot of this whole process is just waiting for things to load, waiting for processes to calculate, waiting for the computer to work. I used to stall to a standstill when I didn't have up to 64 gigabytes of RAM physically installed into my computer. I have a graphics card. I've invested quite a bit just to make these processes go a little bit faster. I am running a little bit of an older CPU, honestly, at this point. It's from 5-6 years ago, and that's something I've considered upgrading, but I was hoping to hold off until I have doctor money to do that. And let's see where we're at. Okay, let me pause this until they're all loaded up. It's going to take a second. Okay, so all of the images have now loaded into the image layers. First thing I want to do is select all, and then I want to align layers. Let's see where that's at. Auto align layers, and I'm just going to say reposition. I found that auto does a whole lot more work than reposition. Reposition is a little bit quicker, moves it within the plane, just allows for minor corrections of any small discrepancies instead of actually twisting the pixels around. Since we're going down on a stack, I think this is the most effective. Even still, this process takes a minute. Just another part of the waiting around. And another reason why I thought it was helpful to kind of decrease the file sizes. Another thing I wanted to talk about is typically during this process, I have gone through the adjustments for all of these first, and then right-clicked on multiple to open as layers within Photoshop, and it'll open the first stack, it'll take a while, it'll open the second stack, it'll take a while. And you can go do other things with your time. There is a limit, I'd say maybe, I don't know, you kind of just figure it out for yourself, maybe 5 total stacks. If it doesn't load up, you just come back to the computer, open up the ones that haven't been processed. You don't want to open way too many. If there are hundreds of different photos within each stack, and you have many, many stacks, it can be a lot for Photoshop, especially if you don't have a whole lot of RAM. So that's something to consider as well. But I typically go through first, adjust all of them, and then start opening them up in Photoshop. Okay. I'm going to pause this until it loads because I have no clue how long it's going to take. Okay. I threw some food in the microwave, got some stuff done. You can always see at the bottom right of the screen kind of what our time is looking like for each of the different processes and how long that takes. Okay, wonderful. So they're all aligned now. Next thing that I want to do is blend them together. Auto blend. This isn't a panorama, it's a stack images. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And then it's going to go through and select and blend based on areas of sharpness on each stack within the focal planes. Use the sharpest image data from each photo. And I'm going to pause that as well for you, and I'll come back when it's done. Well, sometimes the bar moves pretty quickly. Sometimes it'll pause just about here, and then right when it's about to be done, it speeds up real quick. I won't make you sit through this. Give me a sec. Okay, it looks like it's about to finish up. There we go. This is really satisfying because you'll see it go from really shallow to a full image. Wonderful. So we've got a bunch of layer masks, a merged mask. What we want to do is select all layers. So you have to go through, select all the layers, and then I convert to a smart object. This takes a second, and then I go ahead and flatten. Or rasterize layer. Perfect. And what that does is, when it still has all those masks and all those images, you could be looking at a multiple gigabyte file size just for this one image. And I want to make sure that it's small because we've got all the data that we want within here. Okay, looks pretty good. You can see the next thing that we're about to do is crop it. I have delete cropped pixels selected. And see this little zone of where it's fuzzy? That is from the focus breathing. Don't have anything over here because it's all within a safe margin. That was blurry anyways. Okay, sometimes you can really see it if all the sharper areas of the image are up to the edges of the screen. With this, it's only noticeable on the bottom edge, but it's a good example. So just go ahead and click done. So everything's going to be sharp now. And then we're going to go ahead and go back here, select subject. Wonderful. I would like to include this a little bit more in the image. So I'm going to go up to the selection tool, quick selection, and then I want to add to the selection. So I'll hold Shift. I also want to increase the size of the tool first. So I'm going to hit, we'll just do this so you don't have to hear that noise. So hold Shift and kind of just expand that border a little bit. Oh, went too far. Control Z. Expand, expand. Going to use the object selection tool now and do the additive. Just because I kind of want to get those out of focus areas as well. Okay. Going to go to the lasso tool. Select that. Perfect. So this is a little bit of a harder one. They're not always going to be this hard. You know, I'm changing my mind. I may not include the out of focus area there. It's not pertinent. This area is not included, so we're going to lasso this up. Okay. The Smart Object Selection tool really is a game changer, even if it looks like I'm doing a lot of work now. I used to manually have to go in and select everything, so it's a huge, huge upgrade. I changed my mind again. Really want to include this stuff here. I'm holding down the Shift key to get this as a plus, otherwise it would just change the selection. Okay, I'm going to add all that in. Perfect. Now I want to create a layer mask, so I do that here. And then I also want to create a solid color layer, black. I'm going to drop it below. And look at that. There's our object. Now the borders look pretty harsh. What I should have done is I'm going to actually go back and see if I can get my selection back. Perfect. I want to feather by 10 pixels is good. And then they actually have the layer mask here, much better. Gonna create a solid color layer again, drop it below, and perfect. At this point, I'm gonna hit Control S just to save it. Takes a second to save. Okay, wonderful. I'm pretty happy with this. So here, it will not be in the photo stack for the one that we just did. So you select these two, make sure that's selected, Control G, and then it becomes the header of the photo stack. And typically I would do that for all the images and then at the end go back and do this, but I'm just going to show you what the next step in the process is. Get the remove tool. This one's pretty darn good. Sometimes you're going to see a bunch of hairs that you'll want to remove. That's more for really tiny objects. This honestly is looking pretty good. Here's a hair, just for an example. I'm gonna make this smaller. I use the shortcut key, the left and right bracket, to change the size of my brushes and tools. Oh. Got to select the correct layer. I just selected the actual image layer, and then I'm just gonna select that, and voila, it's vanished. Easy peasy. Sometimes if there's a bunch of wax, I'll just remove it in that manner. Great. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And the borders look a lot smoother now that there's that little bit of feathering that we did earlier. I'm gonna hit Control Save again. It'll be a bit quicker now that we've only made a minor change. And then go back into Develop. This is kind of the image. And I like kind of messing with the tone curve. Get a little bit more contrast in there. Dr. Rozier does not love when whites are blown out, so I'm going to keep that kind of under control there. But that is, I like zooming out to kind of see what it looks like if you were just to hold it up on a phone or see it on a page instead of having it way up in your face. I'm pretty happy with this. Maybe just turn the highlights down just a tiny bit. Okay, cool. All right. So next thing we're going to do is export it. So let me go through my exports. I believe it should be okay. Let's see. I'm going to go to JPEG. 90 should be good for this. And then after processing, I say show in Explorer. That way I don't have to search through files just to get to everything again. Go to Box. Okay, Mr. X is there. Mr. X2. I don't want to confuse people, so I'm going to make a Mr. X2 second set. That way people know if they're looking for the newer images exactly where it is. Upload that real quick. And then to share it, create a link. It's copied. And then I'm going to go ahead and send that link to him. I'm not going to send it now because I want to get through all the images before I do this, but that will be a part of the process. This is where you end up putting them in Box. Yeah. So that's my process. Like I said, a lot of this can be done while you're waiting. There's a lot of processing steps. Try to combine as many processing steps as possible. Another thing I didn't show you, which is really important, and I'll show you after I eat lunch here, and after I open in layers, is an automation, which I find incredibly helpful, allows me more time to do stuff in the foreground while it's working in the background. Okay, everything's loaded up now. I've had my lunch and got the whole thing to do over again, right? Well, welcome to actions or automations. I have an automation called Teeth, and you can kind of record all of the steps that we did before. And you can see here, select all current layers, align current layers, auto blend layers, select all layers, convert to smart object, flatten image. I'm just going to hit go, and sure enough, it's going to do it all on its own. That way it can be more of an automated process. I've tried to get it to where it will do this image and then do the next image, shut it out. I haven't found a way to do that. It always has an issue where it saves it as like a single image, and then the next one will save and overwrite that image. If you find a way to get that done to where you can have them all load up and then go through 10 different stacks without having to click, let me know. But that's just not something I've been able to find. Okay. So this is at the very end of the process. I haven't touched the mouse and it's about finished up. You'll see it's about to clear up some of the data over on the lower right as well, just as part of the process. If you've been keeping an eye on the clock on the lower right, you can tell that this whole process is rather lengthy. Cool, and it automatically cleared it all up. You can see better this focus breathing border that I was talking about. Remember how we said if there's anything of interest in the photo, it'll be blurry. And that's kind of the margin. It's actually pretty thin on this. When you get really close up and you get close to the lens, remember how we said that anything further away has less distortion. So if you get further up close, there's going to be a wider border on the ends of the images. Okay, this looks great. I'm going to have to process this, process the other photos. I'm going to try to do some other stuff. One of the things oh yeah, before you leave, just hit Control S so it saves into your Lightroom. There it is. I'm going to group it with this stack, and we can mess with this later on. For the one that we already did, I want to go ahead and rate that 1 just to know that I'm done with the process on it. And yeah, so we have quite a few more images to process, and it takes a lot of time. So that's just something to consider. It's a pretty lengthy process, but I think the images are definitely worth it. All right, I think that should be good for now. If you do have questions, please let me know, and I'd be happy to help you out. All right.